In the shade of a roadside tree, to the west of the town of Portridge, was Prairie, in Canada. There is a white cross, on which the name of Timothy Richard McLean is written in capital letters. A message is scrawled on the cross below. "I think about you all the time, son. With love, Dad." There is another cross next to this cross. He's wearing a blue work shirt. Sports glasses are attached to the collar of this shirt. All these things belong to a man named Timothy McLean. It was at this place that his life tragically ended on the 30th of July, 2008. A monstrous crime has occurred here. By its cruelty, it can be put in the first place among the crimes committed in Canada. Horror in this case is added by the fact that 4 or 5 hours of Timothy's murder, several dozen people saw, but could not help the young guy in any way. Timothy Richard Tim McLean Jr. Born on the 3rd of October, 1985th year in Victoria, Canada. He spent his childhood in the cities of Ally and Winnipeg, where he worked as a barker at fairs. On the evening of the 29th of July, 2008, Tim ended his long business trip, and he was finally returning from work from the city of Edmonton to his home in Winnipeg. It was a long way, 1,300 kilometers. Tim chose a bus for such a long journey. He bought a ticket for the 1170 Greyhound Lance bus. According to the schedule, the bus left the next day, July 30th. The bus route ran along the so-called Yellow Hat Highway through the province of Saskatchewan. At noon, Tim boarded the bus and sat down at the end, in the penultimate row in front of the toilet. The doors closed and the bus set off. To pass the time on the way, Timothy chose to sleep a little with his favorite music. He put on headphones and soon after the departure of the bus fell asleep. While Timothy was on the road, expecting to see his family soon. In the town of Erickson there was another participant in this story, a Chinese man named Vince Vince. Moved to Canada from Beijing in 2000 and the first year together with his common-law wife Anna. They settled in Winnipeg. In 2000, they moved to Edmonton. Did you work at a Walmart fast food restaurant there? Not to be confused with the supermarket chain in the USA. And also engaged in the delivery of newspapers, and now it was July of the 2008 year. At the beginning of the month, Vince Lee quit the diner, allegedly due to disagreements with other employees. And on the 28th of July, he asked for a day off from his newspaper delivery job to go to Winnipeg for an interview about a new job. On the same day at midnight, Vince takes a bus to Winnipeg. However, the next day, the 29th of July, around 6 o'clock in the evening, they get off the bus in Erickson. Erickson is thousands of kilometers from Edmonton. Vincent has 3 bags of luggage in his hands. On this day, he goes to the grocery store and spends a lot of time there. According to eyewitnesses, he was seen sleeping on a park bench at night. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, he was seen sitting with his eyes wide open. The next day, on the morning of July 30th, he sells his laptop to a 15-year-old guy for $60. And again, they spend most of the day at the grocery store. At 17:55, Vincent Lee, a 40-year-old shaven-headed Chinese, gets on the bus number 1170 and sits in the front part of the cabin. Passengers notice that Vince is slightly agitated, but in principle nothing suspicious. At 19 o'clock exactly, the bus makes a stop in Brandon. The driver gives the passengers time to have a snack. Winnipeg is just over 200 kilometers away. Lee gets off the bus. According to passengers, his tension is increasing. He already looks very agitated, and as if he is upset about something. At 19:30, the passengers return to their seats. 4 passengers, the driver turns on the Zorro movie, the bus goes on. Vince Lee moves from his former seat from the front of the bus and heads back. He approaches 22-year-old Tim McLean. Tim looked at Lee, smiled at him, and motioned for him to sit next to him. Lee sits down next to me. Meanwhile, Tim puts on his headphones, leans against the window glass, and falls asleep again. A few minutes later, the other passengers will hear Vincent Lee begin to repeat some Chinese chants in a low voice. The bus is approaching the end point of the route, and the sun is starting to set. 10 minutes later, passengers heard a heart-rending scream from the back of the bus. All 35 people turned their heads and saw a chilling picture. The shaven-headed Vincent Lee took out a huge knife and began continuously stabbing the chest and neck of the unsuspecting Tim McLean. One of the witnesses saw that Lena carried the blows somehow mechanically. At the same time, his face expressed absolutely no emotions. He struck at least 12 blows. The back of the cabin began to pour blood, and Tim continued to scream in pain and horror. One of the passengers reported the incident to the driver. The driver immediately pulled over to the side of the road and ordered all passengers to get out of the cabin. When Lee heard these words, he tried to run out of the bus, but the driver managed to block the doors. Vincent started knocking on doors and windows, trying to break them. However, this did not bring the expected result. 2 men from among the passengers and the bus drivers decided to return to the cabin to rescue Tim McLean. But when they went inside, they saw that everything was covered in blood, and the young man was clearly dead. Vincent Lee kept them away from the body, brandishing a knife. The men ran out of the bus and blocked the doors again. At about 8:30 in the evening, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police CMP station in Port Prairie was walking. There was a report of an attack on a bus. The patrolman immediately arrived and found the criminal inside the bus. Drivers and another passenger guarded the criminal outside, armed with a crowbar and a hammer. The rest of the passengers were standing on the side of the road. Their condition was on the verge of hysteria. According to the driver, the criminal tried to escape on the bus, so he, the driver, had to activate the immobilizer so that he could not start it. The police called for backup. Meanwhile, Vincent Lee began to dismember Timothy's body. He cut off his arms and legs. Then he began to separate the head from the torso. When he finished this procedure, he lifted his head by the hair and began to demonstrate it to passengers through the bus window. After that, he cut off the ears, nose, eyes, and tongue from his head. It would seem that there could be anything more terrible than this sight. But it turned out that it could. Vincent started gnawing Tim's face, bit off and swallowed several parts of his heart, and ate his eyes. By 9 in the evening, negotiators and a Special Forces detachment arrived at the scene of the events. The suspect walked from one end of the bus to the other. Periodically, he approached Tim's body and ate it. The rest of the bus passengers were taken to the police station for questioning. The commandos tried to pull Lee out of the bus, but he wouldn't let them near him. CMP officers heard the suspect shouting on the bus, "I have to stay on the bus forever." This confrontation lasted more than 4 hours. Finally, on the 31st of July, at 1:38 in the morning, Vince Lee broke the side window of the bus, got out of it, and tried to escape. The commandos shot him twice with a stun gun, twisted his arms, and loaded him into a police car. All this was happening in the town of Portage-la-Prairie. Tim McLean didn't get home for some 87 kilometers. When the forensic team got on the bus, they saw the mutilated and badly cut parts of Timothy's body. After searching Lee's pockets, the police found a nose and ears in them. All the body parts were packed in plastic bags and removed from the bus. The eyes and part of the heart could not be found. Most likely, they were digested by Vincent Lee's stomach. As you know, the Unsolved Mysteries channel has its own Telegram channel, where photos and videos that have not been censored by YouTube are published according to some investigations. When creating this video, we also managed to find a photo of the consequences of the monstrous murder of Tim McLean. But these photos are so shocking that the authors of the channel will not publish them even in a Telegram. And then you will find out why. At 10 o'clock the next day, representatives of the Greyhound carrier company took all the passengers to a clothing store, so that they could buy things to replace those abandoned on the bus. On the same day at 15:30 they were delivered to Winnipeg. A few days later, on August 5th, Vincent Lee appeared in court. He refused legal aid. He was charged with second-degree murder. Second-degree murder is considered intentional homicide without collusion by Canadian law. Murder with intentional injury to health, or as a result of extreme indifference to human life. Vincent Lee was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. The only thing he said that day was to address the judge. "Please kill me." Vincent's former colleagues spoke of him as a very conscientious employee who always tried to do his job well. There were no conflicts at work with anyone. According to colleagues, Vince had some communication difficulties due to the language barrier. But he didn't get upset or angry if someone couldn't understand him the first time. One of Lee's superiors described him as a conscientious, reliable, hardworking, and trouble-free employee. Some reported that sometimes Lee could, without pursuing any specific goal, get on a bus and go to another city. A week after the murder of Tim McLean, Ken's Greyhound company launched a nationwide advertising campaign with the slogan, "There's a reason you've never heard of anger on the bus." The murder was the reason for a large number of calls and appeals to the company's offices, demanding to strengthen security in interregional buses. Tim's family filed a lawsuit for $150,000 against the Greyhound Company, the Minister of Justice, and the Attorney General of Canada, as well as against Vincent Lee. The fate of this claim has not yet been determined. Timothy's father, Tim McLean's sister, said he was prohibited from disclosing details of negotiations regarding this lawsuit. "From the first day, we received words of condolences, gratitude, and sincere apologies from everyone. From the Ministry of Transport, from the CMP, from the media, everyone supported except Greyhound. Greyhound has not yet expressed any condolences. Nothing at all. Greyhound still refuses to give any comments on this." On the 3rd of March, 2009, the trial of Vincent Lee took place. During the hearing, he was declared insane. Vince himself admitted the fact of the murder, but did not admit that he acted intentionally, and also that he did not have the so-called mens rea, that is, subjective intentions, to commit a crime. In other words, Lee lacked any possible motive for committing the murder. The psychiatrist said that Lee attacked Tim McLean because he heard voices in his head that, in his opinion, came from God. These voices were telling him to destroy the demon sitting next to him. Otherwise, Lee could have died himself. Thus, Vincent Lee was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The presiding judge, John Scarfield, nicknamed the Honorable Mr. Justice, agreed with the diagnosis and ruled that Lee is guilty, but cannot be held criminally responsible for this murder. From the courtroom, Lee was sent to the Selkirk Mental Health Center for treatment. A little over a year after the trial, on June 3, 2000, Lee received permission to walk in the fresh air, under the close supervision of doctors. February 16, 2011. Two bus passengers Tyler and Kelly Shaw filed a lawsuit against the Greyhound Company, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the Government of Canada for the fact that these ladies were subjected to a cruel spectacle. Each of them claimed damages in the amount of $3 million. On the 14th of July, 2015, both women abandoned their claims. Greyhound representatives rejected their accusations and stated that claims could not be brought in accordance with the terms of passenger insurance, to which both women agreed before the trip. On May 30, 2000, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reported that Lee had responded well to his psychiatric treatment, and the attending physician recommended increasing the level of personal freedom of his patient over the next few months. On the 17th of May, 2012, a short article about Vince Intelli appeared in the newspaper Our Post. It said that Lee had been given a temporary pass, according to which he could leave the territory of the psychiatric hospital to walk around the city of Selkirk. The walks must take place under the mandatory supervision of a nurse and a law enforcement officer. The newspaper quoted Lee as saying, "He said that he first heard the eye of God in 2000. 4 years before the murder of Tim McLean, according to Lee. He just wanted to protect the passengers of that bus from an alien attack." Since 2013, Lee has been allowed to visit Lockport and Winnipeg, as well as nearby beaches, under supervision. The geography of his visits expanded. And on February 27, 2014, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation announced that from March, Lee would be allowed to leave the territory of the psychiatric hospital unattended. The duration of such walks began with 30 minutes and gradually increased to 1 day. On the 17th of July, 2014, the Toronto Sun newspaper reported that Officer Ken Barker of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who arrived at the scene one of the first, committed suicide. In his obituary, his family stated that after that monstrous incident, he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. On February 27, 2015, the news reported that Vincent Tooley was allowed to walk unsupervised for 1 day, provided that he has a constantly working cell phone with him. On the 8th of May, 2015, it was reported that Lee had been granted access to local group homes. Group homes are small residential buildings located within a community and designed to serve children and adults with disabilities, or people who have recently been discharged from psychiatric clinics and other medical institutions. As a rule, from 3 to 16 people live in such houses, plus qualified personnel working 24 hours a day. In February 2016, it was reported that Lee had legally changed his name to Will Baker and was trying to get permission to leave the group home to live on his own. On February 26, on the recommendation of the Council for the Supervision of the Criminal Code, he received such a right. A year later, on February 10, 2017, the Council for Supervision of the Criminal Code of Manitoba ordered the management of the Mental Health Centre to prepare an order for the discharge of Vincent Tooley. Lee was declared fully rehabilitated. Absolutely all restrictions have been lifted from it. He was a model citizen. He lives every day with regret for what he did. He knows that. And he knows it was terrible. He will never be able to forgive himself. Society really has nothing to worry about. Because, as the supervisory board noted, when they completely discharged him from the clinic, he had a low risk of relapse, said Chris Somerville, Executive Director of the Schizophrenia Society of Canada. According to Canadian statistics, the risk of relapse among people who find themselves in a situation similar to Lee's situation is only 7%. At the same time, the risk of relapse in people released from prison is 47%. However, Tim McLean's mom, Carol de Delille, does not agree with this decision. She has been struggling with this decision for many years. Vinsuli was assisted. That's good. Maybe he feels better today. And my son is dead. What if he stops taking his medication? We already know what he's capable of. Because of the incident on the bus number 1170, many passengers received serious psychological injuries. The guardianship authorities had to take the child away from one of the women because she developed post-traumatic stress disorder after the incident. Another passenger, against the background of depression that developed after that monstrous murder, committed suicide in 2015 year. Even the criminologists and police officers who were involved in this case complained of mental disorders and nightmares in which they saw the mutilated body of Tim McLean. 5 months after the murder of Tim McLean, his son was born on December 21, 2008. He's just a gift from God sent by my son. He gives me the strength to get up every day, take care of him, do everything that depends on me, says Tim's mom Carol Delille. But this gift also brought pain. Since the 2009 year, the boy has been in the center of a fierce custody dispute between his grandmother Carol and his mother Colleen Estru. Since the 2015 year, the boy has been living with his grandmother and her new husband. Tim Carol's father is divorced. After the trial of 2016 year, they were granted permanent custody. Colleen Estru has not seen her son since January 2018 year due to disagreements with Carol de Delille and the guardianship authorities. Colleen doesn't want to be interviewed about this, but her eyes fill with tears, and her voice trembles when she describes how much she misses her child and how much she wants to see him. Tim McLean's sister also hasn't seen his grandson in years because of the ongoing disagreements with his ex-wife, which, according to him, aggravated the pain of losing his son. He has 2 photo albums, one with Timothy and one with his grandson, and he says he regularly reviews both of them. Now Tim's son is already quite an adult, and soon he will begin to be interested in his father. He knows that some sick person has committed some terrible act on the bus. He knows some details about his father. But most importantly, his family has yet to tell him. Grandma is trying to prepare him for this news. Relatives suggest that Tim's son may one day look into the internet and accidentally find out the whole terrible truth about his father. Most of the passengers on the bus did not support the idea of law enforcement agencies to release Vincentelli after his alleged treatment and rehabilitation. However, one of the passengers on the bus, who lost custody of her daughter after the incident, says that she sincerely sympathizes with Lee. In a way, yes, I forgave him. I was able to understand that he is a person with a mental illness. It doesn't give him complete freedom, but it gives him a slightly better understanding of what's going on. Vincent Lee is not a monster to me. He's just a man who, unfortunately, has suffered a terrible mental illness. But for himself, everyone will still decide for himself who Vincent really is, whether a cruel monster or just a mentally unhealthy person. Badger appears to be a 6-foot-tall Asian male, short dark hair, black t-shirt, arm of the knife right now. Badger, his arm with a knife and a pair of scissors, and Hez defiling the body at the front of the bus speed. Zulu Delta 1 at your leisure, could you give me a shot? Okay, Badger's at the back of the bus, packing off pieces and eating it. I don't know if I did the right thing. God commanded me, but it was my own hands. So I must die. God told me to put the body as far away as possible, or it would come back to life and kill me. I am the evil son of an evil God. God chose me as the killer and chose Tim McLean as the victim. God controls all people for his own reasons.